and welcome to my workshop to make the pedal cart. You need to lay out the wood pieces on the template, and you'll also need the little bag of wheels and things next to you. So lay them all out, and I need you first of all to take the two side pieces and the boot piece. Position and glue the boot in between the two side pieces. I'm just applying a little bit of glue to the outside edges. You'll notice that there's a short angle on the side piece and there's a short angle on the boot piece, and what I want you to do is to line those up and also line the top of the side piece with the top of the boot piece. And you can just see I've flipped it over there just to line those up. Just hold that like that and then just flip it over just to double check that you've got the alignment right. You need to take the back piece. Now the back piece has one chamfered, which is an angled edge. There's the seat back piece which has two angled edges, so make sure you take the right piece. You need to position and glue that onto the back of the car as shown. Take the front piece and glue that onto the front of the body of the car. You can see, if you feel that, all outside edges are flush. I've applied some glue onto the underside of the bonnet and I'm going to glue it on top of the car frame. Just make sure that all outside edges are flush. If you look from here, you can see that the bonnet is slightly inset, and that's going to be for the dashboard a little later on. Take the dashboard and using the emery board just round the corners on one long side, so that's just two corners. There you are, so they've just been slightly rounded on one long edge. Position and glue the dashboard immediately behind the bonnet, with the rounded corners just facing upwards. Just secure that into position. Take the seat back piece and just apply some glue onto one side. You're now going to actually position that against the boot on the inside of the car, and just make sure that one chamfered edge, angled edge, is flush with the top of the boot. Turn the car over, take the seat piece and just run a little bit of glue along the inside of that piece that you've just glued into place. Now I'm using quite a fast setting glue. You might need to leave each stage to dry in between before you proceed to the next one. I'm just going to position the seat piece inside, turn this over so that the seat protrudes by about 3/8 of an inch or a centimetre. Take the central support and position the axles into each of the end rebates. Apply a little bit of tacky glue to one of the axle holders and actually position that on top of the axle and glue against the central support. And you need to do that on each side. Now it's very important that you don't actually glue the axles into place because they need to be removed to be painted. So just glue that onto that one. If you can, just very carefully take out the axles and just leave that to dry. Once that's dry, take the axle covers, apply a little bit of glue on top of the axle holders and position the axle covers on top. Just make sure that all outside edges are flush, and then just repeat the procedure. That's it. Position that on one side and leave it to dry. Take the pedal pieces and actually taking the pedal holder, just use the emery board just to round off the corners. Now I've placed them together just to make it a little bit easier to do this. Use the connector to glue the two pedal holders together, as you can see there, and then just apply a little bit of glue onto each of the pedals and glue them into the holes at each end. And that's the other. So far we've used the emery board to actually shape any wood pieces, but we now need to make some sanding tools so that we can shape the body of the car. Now you've got three different pieces of sandpaper. The coarser grade one you can actually feel with your finger, and it's a sandy coloured one. The one that's slightly less coarser, a little bit finer, is the other sandy coloured piece of sandpaper, and the black sandpaper is the finest. Now literally all I've done is I've put some double-sided tape onto the three odd wood pieces that you've got in the pack. Just double-sided tape on one side, and then I've actually cut a piece of sandpaper to fit on top, and I've done that with all three of them. So you need to make yourself now some sanding tools. Now, using the sanding tools that you've just made, just the ones with the sandpaper on, and starting with the coarser sandpaper, you now need to use those to shape and smooth the body of the car. Always work with the grain of the wood, and again work on a scrap piece of paper so that any dust can actually be just folded up and put in the bin. I would recommend that you also wear a dust mask as well. Now, this can take a little bit of time, and it's entirely up to you as to how much time you put into this. The more time you put into it, the better results you'll get. So you can see I'm just using the coarser grade of sandpaper and using it to shape the wood. Now, once you've actually done that for a little while and you've got quite a nice smooth finish, you may then want to go on to the next grade of sandpaper. Taking one of the 4 wood pieces that are the same size, I want you to position and tape down the Velcro that's in your pack. Now, it's actually sticky on one side, so that should be fine. You then need to take the Abranet, which is very, very fine grade, and actually cut a piece to fit on top of the Velcro, and this is going to be used as your final sanding tool. You'll get to the stage where the body of the car is all nice and smooth. Now, if for any reason you have actually got any little gaps in the wood, literally all you need to do is just apply a little bit of your tacky glue in there and rub some of the dust inside it, let it dry, and then you can re-sand it all off again. It'll be nice and smooth. Now, this one's quite nicely smoothed down. What I'm going to do now is take the Abranet tool and just use this as my last procedure, just to smooth off the wood. And you can see what I'm doing. I'm working with the grain of the wood again, and you'll notice that all the dust then sits inside, so you might get to the stage where you just have to peel it off and tap down any dust. And as before, work on a piece of paper and then discard of any of the dust immediately you've finished. If you want to, you can actually use the excess piece of Abranet that you've got, just fold it over, and that can still be used to shape the body of the car. And you can see there how it's really smoothing it off. Once you've actually been all over the body of the car, take a piece of kitchen towel and just wipe away any dust, because when you come to paint this, if there's any dust there, the paint will actually pick it up. But you need to have sanded and Abraneted all your car before you actually do that. You're now at the stage where you can repeat the procedure with the Abranet on the rest of the wooden pieces. I wouldn't recommend using it on the laser cut wood pieces, they don't use it. But on the connector piece, you can just go over that with the Abranet, the axles, the cover, and then the pedals. So if you actually go over them again with the Abranet, just to smooth off the pieces, like that. Taking a couple of the wood pieces that you've got left that are the same size, go over one side of them with the Abranet tool just to smooth them down. And then the same with the other one. You're now at the stage where everything can be painted, including those 2 tags that you've just Abraneted. I recommend using a decent quality artist paintbrush. I always use a flat bristle paintbrush, and you very carefully need to paint everything. I've painted all the wood pieces now. You only need to paint one side of the support cover, and don't paint this middle section of the central support. The number plate just needs to be painted with a light coloured paint, and everything else I've just painted it as I wanted. In order to be able to paint the wheels a little bit more easily, I threaded them onto a cocktail stick and held the cocktail stick to be able to paint them. Now, you have the choice now of either just glazing all your painted pieces as they are, or actually going back over. We'll use one of the tags with the Abranet. So if I just rub over it like that, take my piece of kitchen towel and just rub it over, you'll see that that has actually smoothed off the wood quite a lot. Now, it's up to you. You can actually glaze now on top of that, or you can give it another coat of paint. I'm using clear nail varnish to do my glazing. There's a variety of other options which are on the notes, so have a look at those. And I'm going to put some first of all on the piece that hasn't been treated to the Abranet. Literally, it's just applied one section at a time, as you would nail varnish, and just leave that to dry. I always recommend you doing part glazing, let it dry, and then carrying on, and then that way you're less likely to knock it. Just keep an eye out for any air bubbles, because very often if you do get air bubbles as you're working, they will dry like that and you end up with little pitted holes on the top of the painted surface. This is the piece that I've actually abronetted, so I'm just going to put some glaze on top of there. Just putting it on smoothly. This is really nice because it's got a nice flat brush, and I'm just going to let that dry. And I recommend you doing these testers first of all, just to make sure that you're happy with the finish before you actually start applying it to the car. I recommend at the minute that you just glaze the wheels, the steering wheel, and you can do those whilst they're still on the cocktail sticks, the central support. You can glaze the pedals, but actually don't glaze the central part because that actually needs to fit in this rebate here. So you can glaze those, and then also the body of the car. So just remember, just to give nice, thin, even coats. Don't go over the coats until you actually go over it for the second time. So just single coats, let it dry, and then go on to the next part, and it makes it a lot easier to hold, and then you'll end up with a much nicer finish. I've glazed everything once now, the body of the car, the central support, the support cover, the wheels, the steering wheel and the pedals. And you can see from the nail varnish that it's actually used only a small part. If you want an even glossier finish, I would reapply the varnish again. We're now ready to start to construct the car. So take one of the wheels and take the axle, just apply a little bit of glue to the end of the axle and insert into the wheel. Now I'm actually, one side of the wheel is a little bit more rounded than the other, so I'm actually having that at the front. I've just glued that into place, and then I'm just going to put a little bit of glue on the top, there, and glue on one of the hubcaps. Now the axle hasn't been glazed, and we've done that on purpose, and the hubcap hasn't been glazed, but we can glaze that afterwards. So you need to do that again. I've threaded through one of the axles. I'm going to now thread through the other one. I'll go through quite easily because we haven't glazed the axle. So just thread that through like that. Now the pedals, they can just be positioned, there we are, in that central rebate. You can now take the support cover and actually glue that on top. If you find that it's a little bit tight, all you need to do is go back and take some sandpaper and just very, very carefully just sand the edge down until you get a nice neat fit. The central support needs to be positioned and glued inside the car frame now. Now you'll notice that where the rebate for the pedals is, that it's actually shorter at one end to the other. Now where there's a shorter gap from the end of the wood, that is actually positioned at the front of the car, and you'll know it's right because the pedals will actually turn round. So you now need to glue that into place, and then you actually need to add the other wheels and the wheel caps onto the ends of the wheels, and those actually can be glazed now. I've glazed the hubcaps. You now need to take the steering wheel and attach it to the steering column. I have done there with a little bit of glue, and then I'm just going to attach the horn, and then that can just be glued into the hole on the dashboard. The last thing that you need to do is to actually give the car a number plate. Now with the little decal, if you have the writing facing you the right way, you need to remove the protective cover on the back. So now as you peel that off, you're looking at the writing backwards, but now you need to put that on the number plate. Just rub over that with your fingers and then peel off the protective covering. Now you've got your little taxi number plate. So I'm now going to glue that onto the front of the pedal car, and then I'm just going to touch up with any more glazing. I've attached the number plate to the front of the car. Now that has got a bit of a sheen to it, but you can glaze it if you want, and then I've actually glazed the horn. So thank you very much for joining in the workshop.